St. Christopher's Medical Center doesn't stop for anyone. Not for the city outside its doors. Not for the Friday night chaos bleeding through its intake bays. Not for the private wars being fought in its corridors under fluorescent light. But tonight, one man in the corner of the waiting room just heard something, and St. Christopher's is about to find out what happens when the wrong person is listening. But first, the moment that started all of it, and a chief of emergency medicine who owns this hospital in every way that matters, a nurse who has been fighting him for 4 months without flinching. One threat, delivered low, private, and precise. And in the waiting room, behind a wall of glass, a young man in a charcoal suit who just set down his phone. He came here for his brother. He's leaving with a different mission entirely. Stay with me. Because what happens next isn't just a story about one hospital, one doctor, one threat. It's about what occurs when a man with no rules decides to enforce the only one that matters. Zara Mensah stands at the intake desk, 29 years old, night shift. Blue scrubs pressed clean despite the hour. Dark skin luminous even under lighting designed for function, not for grace. Her natural hair is pulled back, controlled enough to be professional, full enough to remind you it belongs to no institution. She's charting, focused, completely still inside the storm of a Friday ER. And she is the reason this floor doesn't collapse. Not because anyone says so, because no one has to. She tracks 4 patients simultaneously. She catches a medication error before it reaches a bed. She talks a panicking father down to steady with 3 sentences, and the particular certainty in her voice that says, "I've seen worse, and we handled it." She moves through this ER the way current moves through wire, invisible until the lights come on. She doesn't hear him approach. She never does. That's how Dr. Preston Hale prefers it. Hale is chief of emergency medicine. 44. Silver threading through dark hair, the kind of jaw that photographs well at fundraisers, the kind of handshake that belongs on hospital brochures. He has been the face of St. Christopher's for 11 years. The board loves him. The press quotes him. His residents fear him in the specific way that means they never say so out loud. He crosses the ER floor, and the room adjusts around him. Interns find reasons to look at clipboards. Nurses become very interested in their screens. The air changes the way air changes before weather. He stops directly behind her. His voice drops. To the register he reserves for this, the one no one else can hear. "You filed that complaint," he says. "You want to see how fast I end a nursing career? Try me again." His hand closes around her wrist. Not a grab, not quite, just fingers, just pressure. Now, just enough to be a message and not enough to be undeniable. The ER doesn't freeze the way it would if anyone else heard. Because no one did. That's the architecture of men like him. Violence sized precisely to fit inside the space between witnesses. Zara goes still. Not from fear. From something colder and more deliberate. The stillness of a woman who has learned exactly what reaction costs and is deciding in real time what she can afford. Her jaw tightens. Her eyes stay forward, and she does not make a sound. Across the waiting room, through the thick glass partition separating the intake area from the family seating, a young man in a charcoal suit looks up from his phone. His name is Dominic Reyes, 27 years old, though the way he occupies a room suggests a man who has lived 3 different lifetimes inside that number. Sharp jaw, dark eyes that move the way surveillance cameras move. Steady, complete, missing nothing. He came to St. Christopher's tonight because his younger brother took a bullet and family means you show up, even when showing up means sitting in a plastic chair in a waiting room like a civilian. He was checking messages. He wasn't watching the intake desk. Until he was. He heard every word Hale said to her. Every single word. His phone goes face down on his knee, his hands resting loose until this moment go completely still. Not tense, not angry, and still, in the specific way of a man who has already moved past feeling into deciding. He doesn't stand up. Not yet. He doesn't need to. Not yet. But in this city, in the rooms where his name is spoken quietly and carefully and never twice without looking over a shoulder first. They will tell you the same thing about Dominic Reyes. He doesn't move until he's ready. And when he's ready, things change. Dr. Preston Hale walks away from Zara's desk without looking back. He has no idea what just happened. Zara makes it to the supply closet before her hands start shaking. And this is not the beginning of the story. This is the end of 4 months of fighting alone inside a system built to protect men exactly like him. To understand what tonight means, you have to understand what came before it. And to understand what came before it, you have to stay with me. Because what happens next isn't just about one nurse in one hospital on one Friday night. It's about what occurs when the wrong man hears the right threat. It's about what power looks like when it finally chooses the right side. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell, because this story is just getting started, and you cannot afford to miss what Dominic Reyes does next. The supply closet smells like antiseptic and old linen. Zara locks the door behind her, presses her back against the metal shelving, and lets her hands do what she wouldn't let them do out there. They shake. Not violently. Just that fine, constant tremor that lives in the space between controlled rage and the body's honest response to sustained danger. She knows this feeling. She has survived it before. Knowing doesn't make it smaller. She breathes, counts, waits for her pulse to find its floor. 4 months. That's how long she has been carrying this. 4 months of doing everything the right way inside a system that was never designed to produce the right outcome. It started with a resident named Dr. Camille Osei, 26 years old, first year. The kind of earnest, bone-tired brilliance that reminds Zara of herself at that age, before the hospital taught her how much that earnestness would cost. Camille had misread a chart, not dangerously. A notation error, the kind that gets caught and corrected in handoff, the kind that happens at hour 11 of a 12-hour shift to people who are human. Hale found it during rounds. What followed was not a correction. It was not a teaching moment. It was a systematic, methodical dismantling of a young woman in front of her colleagues, her attending, 2 orderlies, and a waiting room half full of patients who could hear everything through the curtain. His voice never rose. That was the worst part. He didn't need volume. But he had precision instead, the ability to locate exactly which words would do the most damage and deliver them with the calm of a man who had done this many times before and expected no consequences. Camille made it 4 minutes before she had to leave the floor. Zara found her in the second-floor bathroom, sitting on the tile with her back against the stall, arms wrapped around her knees, shaking in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. Zara sat beside her on the floor in her scrubs and didn't say anything useful because there was nothing useful to say. She just stayed. That is sometimes the only honest thing available. She filed her first complaint the following morning. The second came 6 weeks later after Brianna. Brianna was a travel nurse, Atlanta originally, passing through on a 12-week contract. But the kind of woman who laughed easily and worked harder than anyone on the floor and had clearly decided before she arrived that she wasn't staying past her contract regardless of how things went. She pulled Zara aside one Tuesday after a late shift in the parking garage with the particular body language of someone who has been deciding whether to speak for a long time and has finally run out of reasons not to. She told Zara what happened during a night shift 3 months prior. It a corridor where the cameras had a documented blind spot that facilities had been slow to fix. Hale. The specific way he used proximity as a weapon when there were no witnesses and a woman had no clear exit. Brianna told it once. Flat and factual, the way people tell things they have already processed into something survivable because the alternative is falling apart at work. Then she said, "I'm not filing anything. I leave in 4 weeks and I am not spending them in HR meetings. But I thought you should know." She left at the end of her contract. Zara filed anyway. The hospital's response arrived in a formal letter 11 days later. 2 paragraphs, pattern of behavior, interpersonal difficulties, the language of institutions protecting themselves, bureaucratic phrasing designed to make the person raising the alarm sound like the problem, designed to be defensible in the event anyone ever looked closely, designed above all to cost nothing. 3 days ago, she received a notification from the hospital's HR portal. Her employee file had been accessed. No changes made, no documents removed, just opened and read, her 7-year performance record, her complaint history, her emergency contact, her home address. A message with no words in it. Tonight he used actual words. Try me again. In the supply closet, Zara tips her head back against the shelving and stares at the ceiling. She is not crying. She is past the stage where this produces tears. What she feels instead is the specific grinding exhaustion of a woman who has done everything correctly and arrived through no fault of her own, exactly here, alone, documented, outgunned. Her phone buzzes in her pocket. Unknown number. She ignores it. It buzzes again. She closes her eyes. It buzzes a 3rd time. She answers on the 3rd buzz, not because she expects anything useful. Because the supply closet is small and the silence is loud and her hands are still doing that thing she needs them to stop doing, and sometimes any voice is better than the one inside your head cataloging everything you've lost. Ms. Mensah. She almost hangs up immediately. The voice is young, younger than she expected from an unknown number at this hour. American. Unhurried in a way that has nothing to do with having nowhere to be and everything to do with never needing to rush. And the particular calm of a man for whom certainty has replaced anxiety so completely, he's forgotten what urgency feels like. I was in the waiting room tonight, he says. I heard what he said to you. She says nothing. Her thumb hovers over the end call button. His hand was on your wrist for approximately 4 seconds. The voice continues. His exact words were, "You filed that complaint and try me again." There were no witnesses in a position to corroborate. He knows that. He counted on it. Her thumb lowers. Who are you? She asks. Someone who was sitting close enough to hear clearly and far enough away that he didn't think to check. That's not an answer. No, he agrees. It isn't. But I have something more useful than an answer right now. Do you want to keep asking questions about me, or do you want to know what he did after he walked away from your desk? The supply closet hums around her. Somewhere outside the door, the ER continues its ordinary chaos. She makes herself breathe. Talk, she says. He made 2 calls in the corridor outside the physician's lounge. The first was to his personal attorney, a man named Gerald Fitch, who has represented St. Christopher's board members in 4 separate employment disputes in the last 6 years, all settled quietly. The second was to the board chairman. The conversation lasted 9 minutes. Your name came up in the first 30 seconds. Zara's hand tightens on her phone. The administrator who accessed your employee file 3 days ago, he continues, did it following a direct request from Hale, documented in an email that currently exists on the hospital's internal server. He asked her to pull your complaint history, your home address, and your personnel record. She complied and sent him a summary. The silence that follows is not empty. It is very, very full. How do you know any of that? She asks quietly. The same way I know that Hale has done this before. Different nurses, different years, same methodology. A pause, brief, measured. I know things. That's the most honest answer I can give you right now. She nearly hangs up for the 2nd time. She doesn't. What do you want? She asks, because nobody volunteers information like this without a denominator. She has lived long enough in the world to know that much. Nothing from you. He says it the way people say things they've considered carefully and arrived at honestly. Well, what happened tonight was wrong. The people moving to bury it are making a mistake. I don't like that kind of mistake. Men who know things always want something. Usually, he says. Ask around about the Reyes family when we hang up. Then decide what you think I want. He ends the call. Zara stands in the supply closet for 10 seconds with her phone at her side. Then she types the name into her search bar. Reyes family. Then, Reyes Organization, New York. What she finds is not what she expected. It isn't a flood of news articles. It isn't a Wikipedia page or a federal indictment or a true crime thread. What she finds is the particular quality of silence that collects around a name that powerful people have decided not to say in public. A community center donation from 3 years ago, anonymous, but sourced back to a family foundation in a local blog that has since been taken down. A warehouse fire on the East Side. 2 summers ago. Accelerant confirmed, origin undetermined, 3 men who worked for a competing operation never seen again. An FBI press conference from 14 months back where the spokesperson said insufficient evidence to proceed in the flat tone of someone who has been told what to say and resents saying it. The Reyes name appears in the margins of all of it. Never in the headline, always in the room. Zara sits down on a box of linen supplies and holds this information the way you hold something with uncertain weight, carefully and with both hands. She is a practical woman. She does not panic. She asks the question that matters. What does a man like that want with a nurse who filed 2 HR complaints? She doesn't have an answer, but she knows, sitting in a supply closet at 11:40 on a Friday night with her career being quietly dismantled 3 floors above her, and that she is out of moves that live entirely in the light. She opens her texts, types 4 words to the unknown number. I'm not done fighting. She watches the screen. 30 seconds later. Good. Neither am I. Dominic Reyes has never once in his life sat in a waiting room and felt like he was waiting. Waiting implies uncertainty, implies that the outcome is outside your hands, and all you can do is endure the distance between now and knowing. Dominic doesn't experience time that way. And he experiences it as a sequence of decisions, each one narrowing the possibilities, each one moving something from unknown to managed. Even sitting still, he is working. Even in a plastic chair under fluorescent light in a hospital where his brother is in surgery, some part of his mind is always running the board. Tonight, the board just got a new piece. He stays in his seat after the call ends. Doesn't move. Doesn't pull out his phone immediately. He just sits with what he heard for 60 seconds. The doctor's voice, the specific words, the way the woman at the intake desk went still in a manner he recognized not as fear, but as someone who has survived enough to know when to go quiet. He recognized it because he learned the same thing young. Dominic was 23 when his father died. 3 bullets, a Tuesday night, a corner of East Harlem that the city had been systematically underprotecting for 40 years. His father had built the Reyes operation from a numbers game and a handshake network into something with actual architecture, territories, relationships, a code that wasn't written down but was understood by everyone who operated inside it. When he died, the architecture needed someone to hold it up. Dominic became that someone, not because he wanted an empire, because the alternative was watching everything his father built collapse onto the people who depended on it. And Dominic has never once in his life been able to watch something collapse when his hands were available. He runs 11 people directly, 11 who know the full shape of what the Reyes organization is. Below them, a network of relationships, business owners, city employees, the men who move things and know things and owe things, who interact with pieces of the operation without ever seeing the whole. The FBI has been trying to see the whole for 4 years. They keep finding edges. What they have never understood, and what Dominic has never needed them to understand, is that he did not build this on violence. Violence is loud and expensive and creates problems faster than it solves them. He built it on information, on knowing, precisely, specifically, completely. More about every situation than anyone else in the room. He pulls out his phone at the 60-second mark and makes the first call. By the time his contact calls back 11 minutes later, Dominic knows that Preston Hale has been chief of emergency medicine for 11 years, sits on 2 hospital foundation boards, has a malpractice settlement from 2019 that was sealed by mutual agreement, and owns a vacation property in Connecticut registered under his wife's name. He knows that St. Christopher's building is majority owned by a real estate holding company whose 3 principal investors include a city councilman currently running for state senate. He makes the second call. This one takes 4 minutes. When it ends, he knows which 3 board members have the kind of quiet complications, a licensing issue here, an undisclosed conflict of interest there, that make men very interested in resolving problems quickly and without additional attention. Hale has no idea any of this has happened. That is the thing about information. It moves without sound. Dominic stands, rolls his shoulders once, and walks toward the exit. On the way through the corridor, he passes the hospital's staff directory, mounted near the administrative offices, one of those boards with small photos and 3-line bios, the kind that exists in every institution for reasons no one fully remembers. He slows, finds the name because he is already looking for it. Zara Mensah, IRN, Emergency Department. 7 years at St. Christopher's Medical Center. The photo is the kind taken under bad lighting at a mandatory HR session. Slightly too bright, slightly awkward angle. The expression of someone who was told to smile on a busy workday and did their best. It is not a flattering photograph. He looks at it for longer than information retrieval requires. Then he closes the screen and walks to the parking garage. His phone buzzes at 1:47 a.m. Marco is out of surgery, stable, and the bullet missed everything that would have made this a different kind of night. Dominic sits in the chair beside his brother's bed and watches him sleep for a moment. 22 years old, pale under the hospital light, looking younger than he has any right to after the life he keeps trying to step into. The guilt sits in Dominic's chest like a second heartbeat. It has been there since the call came in. It will be there for a while. He makes a third call. His lawyer answers on the second ring because his lawyer knows better than to let it go to 3. "I need you to research something," Dominic says. "Hostile workplace case, medical setting, nursing staff, senior physician, institutional suppression of complaints." He pauses. "Yes, tonight." He leans back in the chair, looks at the ceiling. Outside the window, the city runs on the way it always does, on decisions made in rooms no one sees, by people the morning news will never name. And 3 floors below, in a supply closet that smells like antiseptic and old linen, a nurse with shaking hands just sent 4 words to an unknown number. The war hasn't started yet, but both sides just picked theirs. If this story is hitting different, you already know what to do. Like, share, and subscribe. Because what happens next? Hale makes his move, and Dominic makes his counter. Drop a comment below. Do you think Zara should trust him? 1 week is enough time to understand exactly how an institution decides to destroy someone. It doesn't happen loudly. That's the first thing they count on, that the silence of it will make you doubt yourself, make you wonder if you're reading the situation correctly, if the pattern you're seeing is real or constructed from your own anxiety. The second thing they count on is that you're alone, that the cost of standing beside you is high enough that the people who like you will decide, quietly and without announcement, that they like their jobs more. Both calculations, in Zara's case, are running exactly as designed. The performance review appeared in her employee portal on Wednesday. Formal. Documented. Dated 3 days after her last complaint, which means someone decided that timeline was defensible and didn't care that it was also obvious. 7 years at St. Christopher's, 7 years of exceeding expectations, of being the nurse other nurses came to, of covering shifts and catching errors and holding this floor together with competence and consistency. And her first formal review is a document that uses the words, communication challenges, and difficulty with authority structures in the same paragraph. She read it twice. Then she closed the portal and went back to work, because that is what you do. Her schedule changed the following day. The rotation she'd held for 3 years, the one that worked around her continuing education coursework, the one her supervisor had approved without comment for 6 consecutive scheduling cycles, was reassigned. She is now on the worst possible split shift. Days that make rest impossible and mistakes likely. The kind of schedule that breaks people down slowly enough that when they finally leave, it looks like their decision. 2 colleagues who used to stop by her station to talk have become very focused on their own work. She notices. She files it. She keeps moving. And her labor attorney is named Patricia Webb, 41, sharp, genuinely good at what she does. She operates out of a 2-person office 12 blocks from St. Christopher's and has won cases that larger firms turned down. She is also, as she explained to Zara across a desk stacked with folders on Thursday afternoon, working with the tools available in the reality they actually inhabit. Without corroborating evidence, Patricia said, we're building this on your testimony against his. His attorney is Gerald Fitch. Fitch has more billable hours in employment suppression cases than I have years of practice. We can file. We should file. But I want you clear-eyed about what slow and expensive looks like before we start. Zara was clear-eyed. She has always been clear-eyed. It is both her greatest strength and the thing that makes certain kinds of hope harder to sustain. She came home that night and found the package outside her apartment door. No return address, no postage, and hand-delivered then. Which meant someone had been to her building, had known her address, had decided that was acceptable. She stood in her doorway for a moment before she picked it up. Inside, a USB drive. Black. Unremarkable. She plugged it into her laptop at the kitchen table with the particular feeling of someone opening a door they can't unopen. The first folder contained documents. 3 years of internal HR complaints filed against Preston Hale by 6 different employees. Complaints she had never seen. Complaints that should have been accessible through the formal investigation process but weren't, because they had been filed, received, and systematically moved into an administrative archive that existed specifically to make them difficult to locate. The second folder contained 2 audio files. The first was a phone call. Hale and the board chairman. 48 hours ago. Her name appeared in the second minute. The chairman's voice was the specific register of a man who has managed uncomfortable situations for so long that discomfort no longer registers on his face or in his tone. The Mensa matter, he called it, like she was a memo. The second recording was worse. Hale and the hospital's head of legal. 11 minutes. The phrase managing the Mensa situation appeared 3 times. They discussed the performance review. They discussed the schedule change. They discussed, and with the calm of people who have done this before, the expected timeline for her resignation. Zara sat at her kitchen table with the USB in her hand for a long time. She knows what this is. She knows what it cost to produce. Not money, but reach. Someone had moved inside the walls of St. Christopher's and extracted its private architecture. That is not something a labor attorney does. That is not something that lives in the legal world at all. That is Dominic Reyes. She texts the number. Oh, this is inadmissible. The response comes back in under 2 minutes. Some of it. Not all. Your lawyer will know which parts. The rest is for you to know they're afraid. She reads it twice. Then she calls Patricia. She hears her attorney's voice change in real time, the shift from professional composure into something sharper and more alive, as Zara walks her through the contents of the second folder. A long silence follows. Then, Zara, where did you get this? A beat. No, don't answer that. Just tell me. Patricia's voice is careful now. Careful and very focused. Is there more? She chooses a Jamaican restaurant in Crown Heights that has 12 tables, good lighting, and no reason for anyone from St. Christopher's to walk through the door. She arrives 10 minutes early because she needs to already be seated when he gets there. She needs the table between them before she has to watch him walk in. He arrives exactly on time. In person, Dominic Reyes is younger looking than the weight of his name suggested, and older feeling than 27 has any right to produce. He is dressed like someone who owns expensive things, but has decided tonight not to announce it. Dark jacket, no tie, nothing that performs. He finds her table without asking anyone, which means he already knew where she'd be sitting, which means he arrived having done exactly what she'd expect him to do. She clocks all of it in the first 5 seconds, and he stands when he sees her. Not a power move, just a reflex, the kind of thing the body does before the mind can calculate the optics. She clocks that too and files it somewhere she doesn't examine yet. He sits. Neither of them reaches for a menu. "I looked into you," she says. Not an apology, a statement of terms. "I know," he says. "The warehouse fire, the FBI press conference, the particular way your name doesn't appear in print even when it's clearly in the room." She keeps her voice even. I know what you are. I'm here anyway, which means I need to understand something before this goes any further." She meets his eyes. "What do you want in return?" He doesn't look away, doesn't shift, doesn't perform offense at the question. He considers it the way she's come to recognize, briefly, honestly, with the economy of someone who doesn't explain himself often and is choosing to make an exception. "Nothing transactional," he says. I grew up in East Harlem watching men like Hale operate. Different industries, same architecture, power using institutions as cover, so the damage never shows up on any document that matters. I watched it take people who didn't have the resources to fight back." A pause. "I have resources now. This landed in front of me. I chose to step in." "That's a principle," she says. "Not an answer." Something moves in his expression. Not irritation. Closer to respect. Men like you don't do things without a reason," she says. He doesn't flinch. "Men like me don't do things without a cost calculation. I've done the math on this one." His eyes stay on hers. "I'm here anyway." The food arrives. Neither of them acknowledges it. "The USB," she says. "Some of what's on it can't go near a courtroom." "I know. I won't use anything that compromises the case. And not because I'm protecting you, because I've spent 4 months building something that has to survive scrutiny. I bring inadmissible material in, and Hale's attorney buries us in chain of custody arguments before the substance gets heard." "I know that," he says. "I identified the admissible portions before I sent it. The recorded calls were made on a system with a disclosure clause in the employee agreement. Every St. Christopher's staff member consents to monitoring during onboarding. Your lawyer will find it in paragraph 9 of the standard contract. Those recordings are clean." Zara is quiet for a moment. That is not information she gave him. That is not something he found after the fact. He went into this already knowing where her line was and built his approach around it before she had the chance to draw it. He anticipated her ethics before she articulated them. The feeling that produces is complicated enough that she doesn't try to name it yet. "There's something you should understand about how I operate," she says. "I don't outsource my decisions. You can move in the background and clearly you're going to regardless of what I say. But this case goes the direction I determine. The legal strategy is mine and Patricia's. You're a resource, not a partner." He nods once. "Understood." She looks at him for a long moment across the small table. The restaurant moves around them. Conversation, the smell of something good from the kitchen, and the ordinary warm noise of people eating dinner. None of it touches what is happening between them, which is two people recognizing, without ceremony, that the other one operates by a code in a world that stopped rewarding codes a long time ago. She extends her hand across the table. "We do this clean." He takes it. as clean as it can be. Neither of them lets go immediately. Patricia files on a Thursday morning, State Medical Board and EEOC simultaneously, and two separate complaints drawing from the same documented pattern: the admissible recordings, the buried HR files, 7 years of Zara's clean performance record against a retaliatory review dated 3 days after her last complaint. The timeline alone is its own argument. St. Christopher's responds by going very quiet, not the quiet of innocence, the specific, yet expensive quiet of an institution that has placed itself entirely in the hands of attorneys and been told to generate nothing: no statements, no internal memos, no emails that could later be subpoenaed. The board stops meeting in person. Hale's name disappears from the hospital's public communications. Someone removes his profile photo from the department web page, then puts it back, then removes it again. They are afraid. Zara knows what afraid looks like when an institution feels it. It looks like silence and lawyers and very careful inaction. She uses the time to find Brianna. It takes 4 days. Brianna Okafor is in Phoenix now. A permanent position at a clinic, a new city, a life she has clearly constructed with deliberate distance from everything St. Christopher's represents. When Zara finally reaches her, the phone call moves the way calls move when someone has been waiting to receive it and dreading it simultaneously. Brianna listens to everything, doesn't interrupt. When Zara finishes, the silence on the line is the particular silence of a woman measuring what speaking would cost against what continued silence has already taken. Zara doesn't push. She has learned from years of sitting beside people in their worst moments that pressure produces compliance and not courage, and she needs the latter. "I'm not asking you to be brave for me," Zara says. "I'm asking you to know that if you're ready, when you're ready, there's a case strong enough to hold your story now. It won't fall apart around you this time." Brianna says she'll think about it. 2 days later, she calls back. Her voice is steady in the deliberate way of someone who has decided to be steady before dialing. Someone contacted her employer in Phoenix. Anonymous tip, professional conduct issue at a previous hospital, no specifics, nothing actionable. Carefully designed to be just enough to make her feel that the long arm of St. Christopher's could reach Phoenix without breaking a sweat. "I haven't said anything to them," Brianna says, "but I want you to know they tried." "I know," Zara says. "I'm sorry." She texts Dominic after she hangs up. They went after Brianna in Phoenix. Anonymous tip to her employer. She sets the phone down and goes to make coffee. When she checks it 12 minutes later, his response is already there. Handled. And she stares at the word. She calls Patricia the following morning. The anonymous tip, Patricia confirms, has been formally retracted, a correction received by Brianna's employer from someone presenting as a hospital accreditation officer. The matter is closed. Brianna's position is unaffected. Zara sits with this information. He moved before she asked. He anticipated the threat, removed it, and then told her after the fact with a single word that offered no explanation, because he knew she would understand without one. She understands without one. She is running on Saturday morning when she rounds the bend near the fountain and finds him there. Dark jacket, hands in his pockets, standing beside a park bench like the morning arranged itself around him. She slows but doesn't stop. "You run here now?" "I needed air." He falls into step beside her without asking. She lets him. They walk the next quarter mile without talking about the case. He asks about the neighborhood, how long she's lived nearby, whether the coffee place on the corner is worth it. Small questions, the kind that have nothing to do with strategy. She answers them and asks her own, and somewhere in the exchange he says, without appearing to notice he's said it, that he hasn't walked through a park in daylight in longer than he can accurately remember, that the operation runs on logistics and decisions and the specific loneliness of being the person in the room everyone is waiting on. that she is the first person in recent memory who pushes back on him without calculating the cost first. He says it the way people say true things when they've briefly forgotten to guard them. She doesn't respond. She keeps walking. Her phone rings. Patricia. She answers and listens and stops walking without meaning to. Brianna has agreed to give a formal statement. Zara closes her eyes. Just for a second. Just long enough to feel the full weight of what that costs someone and what it means for the case, and what it says about how far they've come from a supply closet and a shaking pair of hands. When she opens them, Dominic is watching her. The expression on his face is one she has started to recognize. Quiet and unguarded in a way his face rarely allows itself to be. Warm in a way that has nothing to do with the case. She turns back to the phone before either of them has to name it. She buys the blazer the Tuesday before. Burgundy. Well cut. The kind of garment that doesn't ask permission from the room it enters. She hangs it on her closet door that night and looks at it for a moment before she turns off the light. She needs to feel like armor. She is allowed to build that from whatever materials are available. The hearing room is on the 14th floor of a state office building 12 blocks from St. Christopher's. Fluorescent, formal, arranged with the particular institutional neutrality of a space designed to suggest that what happens inside it is purely procedural. It is not purely procedural. The public gallery is full, standing room by 8:45 a.m., because a journalist published the buried HR complaints 6 days ago in a piece that ran nationally by evening, and the sourcing was listed as anonymous. The documents were unimpeachable. Zara had texted Dominic after she read it. The journalist. His response. Good timing. She sits beside Patricia at the respondent's table with her hands flat and still, and her face composed in the careful way that strong women learn early, because the room will use visible feeling against you before you finish having it. Hale's attorney is a man named Gerald Fitch, who charges more per hour than Zara makes in a week, and has the practiced aggression of someone who has won by exhaustion more often than by merit. He attacks her timeline in his opening, the gap between the initial incident and her first complaint, which he frames as fabrication time. He attacks her motives, her employment record, at the fact that she consulted a labor attorney before filing her second complaint, as though preparation is evidence of bad faith. He uses the words vendetta and pattern of behavior in the first 20 minutes, which are the hospital's own words, recycled and redeployed with a straight face. Patricia lets him finish. Then she stands up. Brianna's statement is read into the record first. Formal, specific, signed, notarized in Phoenix 2 days ago. So the room goes very still when the hearing officer reads the relevant passage aloud. What Hale did, where, how he ensured there were no witnesses. Still, in the way, that means everyone in the gallery has stopped performing attention and is simply, completely present. Then a written declaration from Dr. Imani Foster, a former St. Christopher's resident who left medicine entirely 18 months ago and moved back to her hometown in Georgia without explaining why. And Patricia's investigator found her. She submitted her declaration by courier, 4 pages, precise and devastating. Then, the recordings play. Hale's voice fills the hearing room, measured, authoritative, discussing the Mensa situation with the hospital's head of legal the way people discuss logistics. The board chairman on the second recording, the particular register of a man managing inconvenience rather than wrongdoing. Zara watches Hale's face while they play. She has thought about this moment, imagined it. What she expected was anger or denial or the performance of innocence. What she sees instead is stillness, the specific, terrible stillness of a man watching the architecture he built over 11 years come apart floor by floor in public, with no remaining move available. He looks, for the first time since she has known him, like someone who has run out of room. She finds no satisfaction in it, only the clean, a solid feeling of a thing being true in a room where truth has been unwelcome for a long time. The ruling takes 11 minutes to deliberate. Hale is placed on immediate suspension pending full investigation. The State Medical Board opens formal proceedings. St. Christopher's is referred to the State Health Department for evidence suppression. Gerald Fitch requests a continuance. The hearing officer denies it without visible deliberation. Zara reads her statement last. 2 pages. She wrote it herself. She says clearly, in plain language, what the ruling means, and then says with equal clarity what it does not mean. Who is still working in hallways like this one, whose complaints are still sitting in administrative archives. What one case in one hospital fixes, and what it cannot touch. She says all of it without asking permission from the room. Outside, her phone buzzes. How did it go? She looks up through the building's glass doors, across 4 lanes of traffic, and to the coffee shop on the opposite corner. Through the window, a figure in a dark jacket, phone in hand, standing like he has been there for hours, because he has. She raises her hand through the glass. He raises his. She hugs Patricia. She thanks Brianna by phone, standing on the courthouse steps, and means every word. She speaks to 2 journalists, with the precision of someone who has thought carefully about what this moment should say beyond her own name. Then she crosses the street. The coffee shop is warm and slightly too loud in the way of places that have been full long enough to feel lived in. She finds him at a corner table, dark jacket, untouched coffee, the particular stillness of a man who has been waiting without appearing to wait. He stands when she walks in. That reflex again, the one she has stopped trying to categorize. This time it doesn't make her stiffen. This time something in her chest does the opposite. A quiet settling, like a thing finding its level. She sits across from him. For a moment neither of them speaks, and the noise of the shop wraps around them like cover, and it is enough to simply be 2 people in a room where nothing is required of them for the first time in weeks. "You were there the whole time," she says finally. "Yes." 4 hours. "You said stay nearby." His voice is even. "I was nearby." She looks at him across the small table. The afternoon light cuts through the window at an angle that catches the sharp line of his jaw, at the careful composition of his face, the thing underneath it that he has never quite learned to fully conceal from her. "I need to ask you something," she says, "and I need the real answer." "Ask." "What did this cost you? Not money. The actual cost. Exposure, attention, risk. You pointed your entire operation at a hospital dispute that offered you nothing strategic. Men who build what you've built don't do that." She holds his gaze. What did it cost and why did you pay it?" He is quiet for a moment. The particular quiet of someone locating an honest answer in territory they don't usually let anyone enter. "It cost attention I don't have a surplus of," he says. "People noticed I was focused somewhere unusual. Questions were asked internally that I had to manage." A pause. "And it cost me something harder to name. The comfortable certainty that I operate purely on calculation. That I don't move unless the math works." He looks at her steadily. "The math on this didn't work. I moved anyway. I haven't done that before." "Why?" "Because I watched you hold yourself together in that ER after what he did, and something happened in me that I don't have clean language for, and I have spent the time since then trying to determine if it was temporary." He stops. "It isn't temporary." Zara breathes. The room moves around them, ordinary and oblivious. You should know," she says carefully, "that I'm aware of exactly what you are. What the Reyes name means, what the warehouse fire means, what the FBI file that won't close means." She doesn't look away. "I haven't decided what I think about all of it. I'm not sure I can decide what I think about all of it. I know that. I'm a careful woman. I have always been careful. You are the opposite of everything I have ever been careful about. I know that too." Something in his jaw shifts. "I'm not asking you to stop being careful. I'm asking you to let me be worth the exception." She looks at him for a long time. The current has been building since a waiting room chair and an unknown number and a supply closet and a USB drive and a park bench on a Saturday morning when he said something true without meaning to. It has been building quietly, underneath everything else, patient in the way that real things are patient. She reaches across the table, and not his hand, just close enough that the space between them becomes a question with a clear answer. "Earn it," she says. He looks at her, the way people look at things they were beginning to believe they wouldn't find. Then he closes the distance and takes her hand, and presses his lips to her knuckles. Brief, certain, unhurried. "Yes," he says simply. He earns it the way real things are earned, not in grand gestures. Although there is the first edition medical ethics textbook that appears on her doorstep one morning with no note and no explanation, and she holds it for a long time before putting it on her shelf. Not in protection, though there is always a car a block from wherever she is that she pretends not to notice, and one morning she texts him, "I can see it," and he texts back, "I know," and neither of them addresses it further. He earns it by asking questions and waiting for the complete answer, by not flinching when she pushes back, and she pushes back often, on everything, because that is who she is, and he was warned. By learning, slowly and visibly, the difference between standing beside someone and standing over them. By choosing every time the choice presents itself, the former. He earns it by showing up to her first day back at St. Christopher's, not inside, not escorting her, just present on the sidewalk across the street when she arrives, and visible in case the building tries to make her feel alone walking back through those doors. She doesn't acknowledge him when she goes in. She doesn't need to. She knew he'd be there. 6 months later, she is standing at the window of his apartment. It is all dark surfaces and clean lines, a place designed for function rather than habitation, like a man who made himself useful to a city without ever allowing himself to fully arrive inside his own life. She noticed the absence of anything personal the first time she came here. Photos, objects with history, the small evidence of a self that exists outside of work. None of it. Just the city through the glass and the efficient architecture of a man who has been in motion for so long he forgot what staying looks like. He comes to stand beside her. For a moment they are just still. The city below does what cities do. Moves, breathes. She runs on its ordinary decisions and private wars and the labor of people whose names will never be in any headline. "This started," she says quietly, "because he threatened me in the wrong room." "No." His voice is low, certain. "It started because you were already fighting before I got there. I just made sure the building didn't fall on you while you did." She turns. He's right there, close. The city hums behind the glass. She raises her hand and puts her palm against his jaw. Warm skin. Where the slight roughness of the hour, the way his breath changes in that single unguarded moment that she has come to understand, is the most honest thing he knows how to offer. "We," she says. He smiles. Wide and real. The warmth under all that architecture, finally and completely unmanaged. The smile of a man who has been alone in his power for a very long time and has, against all calculation, found somewhere to put it down. "We," he says. Outside, St. Christopher's Medical Center keeps running, and nurses chart through the night. New residents learn, slowly and at cost, what this work asks of a person. The ER doesn't sleep. Dr. Preston Hale's medical license remains under review. 3 board members have quietly resigned. A new patient advocacy policy is in its 2nd draft, written in part by a nurse who refused to disappear when the institution asked her to. It is not everything. It was never going to be everything. But it is real. It is documented. And it belongs to everyone who comes after her into those fluorescent halls and finds, for the first time, that someone left the door open. Inside one window above the city, 2 people stand at the glass. something permanent breathes on. That's the story of Zara and Dominic, the nurse who refused to be erased, the man who heard everything and chose a side. If this story stayed with you, if you saw yourself in Zara's fight, or in the exhaustion of doing everything right inside a system that keeps moving the goalposts, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below and tell us, what moment hit hardest for you? And if you're new here, welcome. We tell the stories that don't get told in boardrooms or headline, the ones that happen in supply closets and parking garages and fluorescent hallways where someone decided to keep fighting anyway. Like, share, subscribe. Because the next story is already waiting, and trust us, you don't want to miss it.